On the 17th of December 1995, police made a chilling discovery in the Ayrshire town of Kilmarnock. The body of missing schoolgirl Mari Julian.
It's the stuff that nightmares are made of. It's what every parent worries about when their child goes out.
16-year-old Mari had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death.
This was a very, very torturous death. It wasn't quick and it wasn't easy. It was very agonizing.
Mari's twisted killer was 36-year-old Gavin McGuire, a man who had already spent years behind bars for a series of brutal attacks on young women.
I've never met anything like it. It's one of the most dangerous men on the planet.
After a reign of terror that lasted for decades, Gavin McGuire would eventually be unmasked as one of the world's most evil killers. In the run-up to Christmas 1995, the brutal murder of 16-year-old Mari Julian shattered the peace of a small Scottish community.
She'd been dragged by her hands and there were marks on her back. She'd been obliterated. I don't think there's any other word for it.
The perpetrator used her own blouse to strangulate her and to keep her quiet and to probably facilitate a quick death, shoved her own bra in her mouth, making her gasp for air.
In the hunt for her killer, police launched a huge-scale DNA testing operation of local men, including convicted rapist Gavin McGuire.
McGuire was a serial, predatory sex offender who enjoyed the suffering of his victims. He should have been stopped a long time ago.
If ever there was a man who you genuinely thought was a danger to society, it was Gavin McGuire.
This killer's story begins on the 18th of December 1958. Gavin McGuire was born in Stevenston in North Ayrshire on Scotland's west coast.
His parents were called Jimmy and Nettie. He was the oldest of three boys. His dad was a labourer in the steel industry. They were a typically working-class Scottish family. His dad was then made redundant when McGuire was quite young, and that was the source of a lot of financial conflict.
It wasn't a happy family. Jim eventually left the family, leaving Nettie with the three boys. Gavin was difficult as a child.
At the age of 8, McGuire entered the care system. He did not thrive there.
From that point on, we certainly see McGuire breaking the law routinely and regularly and moving from a simple care system into the justice system.
His early years were a mixture of assessment centres, borstalls, young offenders institutions, List D school, which is typically where troubled children will attend.
By the early 70s, McGuire was regularly truanting, and his already troubling behaviour had grown even more disturbing.
He was starting to break into houses, stealing cars. He had some pets, pigeons, in a loft. He set fire to that loft, killed all the pigeons, and reportedly stood there and laughed as these birds died in the most horrific circumstances. And then he went on and did the same thing to some rabbits. Fire setting and cruelty to animals, that's two big ticks. So I would say at around 14, we get a very good idea of who McGuire is and what he's going to be doing in his future.
He was a loner. Didn't mix well, wasn't comfortable in the company of his peers. He wasn't a sociable animal.
McGuire was described as maybe shy, nervous. He has no social skills, that he doesn't really know how to communicate and interact with people. So that is suggestive that if he is a serial offender and predator, that women are gonna become targets.
In 1976, a few months after leaving school, McGuire's malevolent urges towards women became apparent when he embarked on a terrifying spree of sexual violence in Stevenston and nearby coastal towns.
McGuire attacked his first victim at the age of 17 when he assaulted a 15-year-old girl. He then attacked another 15-year-old girl and sexually assaulted her. 2 days later, he carried out an attack on an 18-year-old girl, but she was able to escape before he could sexually assault her.
There was something in him that wanted to express itself in this particularly brutal and unpleasant way to young women. And it's that is the thread that goes through McGuire's story.
It's something that he feels compelled to do. What's driving him is that he doesn't have the normal human emotions. He has no barriers, no filters that's going to stop him.
McGuire was arrested and charged with the attacks on the girls, but released on bail for the sum of £10. It offered little deterrent. Within weeks, the 18-year-old had resumed his pattern of offending.
While he was on bail for these attacks, he then attacked an 18-year-old pregnant woman and beat her up quite severely.
And he kicked to the ground and robbed the garage thereafter. And he carried out a similar theft in a garage nearby as well.
This is all in a period of days, and it does feel like this is compulsive.
McGuire's shocking spree continued, and another innocent young woman fell victim to his deviant urges.
The latter attack against a young lady who he'd approached, he threatened her with glass and unfortunately achieved his objective of raping that young lady.
He's reckless. He's been caught mid-offence sometimes. He's been chased. He just continues. It seems to me like he has no care for what happens to his victims. He doesn't seem to have a huge amount of care for what happens to him either.
McGuire was quickly identified and apprehended. Back in court, he admitted 8 new offences to the judge.
Rape, sexual assault, assault with sexual intent, theft, car theft, a multitude of bad behaviour.
In February 1977, less than a year after leaving Borstal, 18-year-old Gavin McGuire was back inside, sentenced to 10 years in a young offenders institution. The judge told McGuire the tariff was necessary to protect the girls and women of Stevenston from the serial offender.
This is a man who's out of control. There can be no question about that.
By December 1995, 36-year-old Gavin McGuire was living with his mother in Stevenston. 20 minutes away in the town of Kilmarnock, schoolgirl Mari Julian was enjoying the lead-up to Christmas.
Mari Julian was the youngest of 2 girls to a family that have been described as honest, hardworking and well-liked within their local community. Mari herself was described as a shy, conscientious girl.
On the evening of December the 16th, Mari went to a pantomime at the town's Palace Theatre.
She's gone with her best friend, Julianne, to see The Sleeping Beauty. It's not very far from where she lives.
The last anybody seen her was when Julianne waved to Mari as they drove away in their car. The plan was Mari's dad would come and pick her up after the performance. However, the play finished early and Mari had let her dad know that she was just going to make the half-mile journey home by foot.
Mari Julian's parents were expecting her home by around 10 p.m, but by 10:30 there was no sign of her. It was extremely unusual for the 16-year-old not to be home as expected. In the darkness, her mother walked the route Mari should have taken.
Mari's family were frightened when she didn't arrive as expected at home, and they very quickly called the police to report her missing.
And this is where the officers come across a horrific human crime scene.
It was every parent's worst nightmare. 16-year-old Mari Julian had been murdered while walking home. The shy schoolgirl had been attacked and brutalized in a way that would terrify the local community and shock even seasoned detectives. Less than 24 hours since her disappearance, Mari Julian's family learned of the horrific nature of their daughter's brutal murder.
A police officer found Mari in a stagecoach bus depot in McKinley Crescent.
She's naked, but for her boots and socks. Her blouse is tied round her neck, and her bra is shoved in her mouth as a gag.
It was a devastating discovery for Mari's family, who learned that the teenager had been killed just 2 minutes away from the safety of her home. For the community, utter shock.
Just a young girl coming home from a pantomime. It's the stuff that nightmares are made of. It's what every parent worries about when their child goes out, and to have it actually play out in the middle of this tight-knit community would have sent shockwaves and fear through absolutely everybody.
In my 30-year police career, I could think of few similar cases. It's a very friendly place. I grew up in the kind of local area. I know the area well. This case would have been shocking to the community.
A post-mortem examination the following day revealed that Mari had been the victim of a vicious and prolonged attack.
There were a lot of injuries on Mari's body, 47 injuries. A lot of them were to her face and head. There were defensive wounds, so that we can see that she fought him and she fought him.
Mari was covered in dirt and she had cuts on her shoulders, and it was suspected that she had been dragged along the ground with her hands. The cause of death at her post-mortem was marked as asphyxia due to strangulation.
This was a very, very torturous death. It wasn't quick and it wasn't easy. It was very agonizing.
The police told the press and the public they believed the violent attack had been sexually motivated.
Strathclyde Police launched an immediate murder investigation. They conducted dozens of interviews.
The London Road, which she walked along, is a busy road. So there would have been a number of cars, a number of drivers driving along that road to go to certain places in the Kilmarnock area and outskirts.
A lot of energy is expended by the local police to track down somebody who can treat an innocent young woman in such a dreadful manner.
Everybody who has a teenage daughter would have been fearful of letting them out in the streets. The community would be scared until individuals arrested for this, absolutely no doubt. And there'd be a lot of reassurance, a big reassurance job by the police.
Police quickly ruled out those close to Mari as suspects and widened their search, harnessing local and national media.
Mari's father, Philip, made an appeal to the public for any information about his daughter's final movements on the night she disappeared.
If anyone knows anything at all, just come forward, please. I've got to find it.
The Daily Record also offered a £10,000 reward for any information leading to her killer's conviction.
Someone in the area had clearly been watching the news. A few days into the new year, just under 3 weeks after Mari's murder, her parents received an anonymous letter in the post.
It's 14 lines long and it includes several fascinating facts. It says, "I think my son may have killed your daughter." It goes on to say that on the night of the 16th of December, the night of the killing, her son had come home and said, "I've done something bad." It goes on to say, "Sorry, I can't give him up. I love him."
It was an intriguing lead. The police appealed for the letter writer to come forward.
It's important that if she's genuine in her belief, then she should have the confidence to come forward and speak this.
But the writer remained anonymous, and 3 weeks after Mari's violent death, the police were still in the dark about her killer.
Stranger murders are the most difficult to solve because there's no relationship between the killer and the victim. Most victims do know their killers. So how do we find who the suspects are?
The early stages of a case like this, it's a whirlwind. You've got a number of competing elements. You have the media element. You sometimes get misinformation. You have the family side, which is extensive, trying to get experts in to speak to the family. There's pressure from a whole lot of different areas, but ultimately your goal is to succeed in bringing somebody to justice and hopefully bring closure to the family in the worst of circumstances.
The police have to be lucky. They have to hope that they leave something at the crime scene that identifies them, or they have to hope that their movements can be tracked.
Scene of crime officers attending the bus depot had meticulously examined the area for anything that could help identify the killer.
They find a shoelace that has been torn apart, and they find blood-soaked clothing. Now, this is very important because it could be the blood of the assailant with all of their genetic profile present, but it could also be the blood of the victim, putting them together.
On the left sleeve of Mari's jacket, tests revealed blood. The laboratory processing the clothing discovered 2 different sources of blood, one belonging to Mari, the other from her killer.
They were not smart enough or thorough enough to clean up. They actually left a lot of evidence that in the hands of the right forensic scientist could produce the evidence needed to identify this person and bring them to justice.
The killer left their DNA at the crime scene. Now, DNA was quite new in those days, and the DNA database was incredibly new. But at least the police knew they had this tool that if they could get a match, that would definitively identify who was at the scene when Mari died.
Today, we have DNA databases where people who have been involved in the criminal justice system have their DNA stored. That was not available back then. Now we had to find that perpetrator. So the police goes on a mission to find the donor of this piece of DNA.
And they start a systematic search of men between about 20 and 40 in the area.
Carry out this exercise would have been extremely unusual and groundbreaking, but it was perceived as a line of inquiry, the best way to go about it.
They start by testing everybody who works at the location of the crime, the bus depot. When that search proves fruitless, they actually expand the search and they eventually test over 20,000 male donors trying to find a match.
It was a mammoth task, but Strathclyde police were drawing on all the resources available to them, including painstakingly trawling through hours of tapes from the town's surveillance cameras from the night Mari was abducted. Their dedication paid off.
The police identify some CCTV at 9:20 that same evening in a shopping mall.
A sharp-eyed officer homed in on a familiar figure.
The CCTV clearly showed him in person, in the area a few hundred yards away from the crime scene on the night in question, just before the crime would have been committed.
It was a man local police knew well. A man who'd spent most of his adult life in prison for attacks on young women. Detectives were confident they had Mari's killer on camera. Eight years before Mari Julian's murder in the summer of 1986, 33-year-old Doris Thompson booked a family holiday in Saltcoats on the North Ayrshire coast.
I had a baby in 1985 and I wasn't working then. And I just had plenty to do with the children. Still had my mum and my dad, my sister and her boyfriend and my youngest son. We all went. I had a week booked at Saltcoats Caravan Park.
Saltcoats was a very, very busy holiday destination for most people in Scotland. At that time, it would be busy, certainly in the summer months.
It was nice that week. It was very good. Good to get out and about. We were enjoying it. The first 2 or 3 days before anything took place, we were having fun.
The holiday was filled with trips to the beach and funfair, but within days, events took an horrific turn. Doris and her husband went out for drinks in the pretty harbour town with her sister and partner.
I think we went into one pub and then we just had one drink and that's where we all sat, laughing and having a good time. Must have been just after 11. And my sister, she'd a splitting headache. She wanted to go back to the caravan. My husband had went to the caravan to make sure she was all right. My brother-in-law went for a taxi. It was just a mix-up that night.
Doris found herself in the dark, deserted streets, alone. As she tried to make her way back, a man appeared from a side street, grabbing her around the neck.
First thing he demanded was, take your tights off, take your tights off. Just put the tights right round my throat. It was pulling as tight as he could pull, so I could start and feel myself fainting at that point.
As Doris struggled for a means of escape or to attract the attention of people in the nearby flats, her attacker dragged her to a gap in the stone harbour wall.
So he dragged me in there and told me to strip naked. All this time, his hands was on my throat. So after I stripped, he pushed me down and it went through there.
The man began to sexually assault Doris, all the while beating her.
He just went into an utter frenzy, punching, kicking. I didn't know where the blood was coming from. That I thought, oh, what am I going to do? So I fought back, and it was punch for punch. And then that was when the strangling started, really bad. So I decided I would go the other way and I would stay calm. That's not what he wanted. He wanted a fight.
Desperate, Doris told the attacker she had 5 young children, one just a baby. His response was to laugh.
How can you laugh like this? This went on for ages. And then the next thing, he leans back and he picks up my dress and he says, put that back on. And I thought, oh, good. I says, he's letting me put on my dress and he's going to vanish.
Having emptied the change from Doris's purse, the attacker dragged her by the throat to the sea wall, where he throttled her. Doris played dead, sinking onto the ground. But her attacker was not finished with her yet.
And he just lifted me and he threw me straight off the harbour into the sea.
Doris struggled in the cold, dark water, knowing she was still not safe.
I lay floating, just with my head to the side, enough is let air in, and I could keep an eye on the harbour wall. It was quite a bright night that night, the moon was bright. I could see him running about. the harbour wall, up and down, and I thought, God is looking for me.
He watched her struggling. There was that enjoyment of somebody else's suffering. So this guy is a sadist.
But coming out the water was terrifying, but I knew it was getting daylight. It was starting to break, and I thought, he's going to see me sooner or later. I've got to get out.
It's an extraordinary escape and a great tribute to her will to live.
I was shaking and I was in shock. I just looked everywhere to make sure he wasn't there. Ran across, knocked all the doors.
It was the early hours of the morning, but one resident opened their door to Doris, whose clothes were drenched in seawater and blood.
The first thing I made them do was bolt the door. I was terrified in case he was still there. So that's where I was till I was taken to hospital.
Doris's jaw was fractured and her front teeth had been knocked out. But she was determined to identify the man who tried to kill her.
Oh, I was angry. The anger was in me. And every time I prayed, I would say, please let me get him. Please let me catch this man.
For the next 2 days, in the hope of spotting her attacker, Doris accompanied 2 female plainclothes detectives around the pubs and clubs of Saltcoats.
I went up and down. The day after, when I got out of the hospital, I was determined he wasn't getting away with it. I think it was 2 days after we went for a tea into the cafe. And the 2 girls went off on their own way and left me with my husband. And I was sitting. And he went by the door. And I thought, there he goes.
With the plainclothes detectives at the other end of the town, Doris and her husband followed the man to a nearby bar. As he took the first sips of his pint, she confronted her attacker.
I said, that's me. It's me. I was the woman that you tried to kill down the shore. Get the wrong man. Get the wrong man.
Doris's husband and locals held the man whilst they waited for the police to return. They arrested him and identified him as 28-year-old Gavin McGuire, a man with a long rap sheet for sex crimes, a man who thought nothing of inflicting pain and suffering on the women he came into contact with.
Her life was not only threatened, he thought it was over. That kind of experience is going to have a lifelong effect.
Charged at first with the rape and attempted murder of Doris Thompson, McGuire's defense team offered a guilty plea to the lesser charge of assault and rape. In August 1986, he was convicted and sentenced to 10 years in prison.
I was happy that they convicted him, but I was deeply unhappy that they dropped the attempted murder charge.
The judge calls him a menace to society and particularly to women, and that's not an understatement.
In 1993, having served just part of his 10-year sentence, Gavin McGuire was released. The 34-year-old serial sex offender was deemed to be safe and returned to his mother's house in Stevenston.
This is somebody with a personality disorder. This is somebody who enjoys watching women suffer. Of course he was going to start offending again.
On the evening of August the 12th, 1995, in the Ayrshire town of Kilbirnie, 9 miles from Gavin McGuire's home, a 21-year-old woman was subjected to a terrifying attack in a park. Held by a man in a stranglehold, she fought for her life.
She's obviously horrified, frightened, but she attacks the only way she can. She bites his finger. He lets her go. A few days later, she sees him in the town. I mean, he's not hiding anywhere. He's not gone on the run.
The man she identified as her attacker was Gavin McGuire.
The police are alerted and is arrested. It's as good an eyewitness evidence as you could possibly get.
McGuire denied the allegation. It was the young woman's word against his.
There's a debate about when that bite actually took place.
The physician who examined, who was actually not a dermatologist, determined that this injury could have only have happened in the last 72 hours, which was unfortunately inconsistent with what the victim alleged.
The case was dropped due to the lack of corroboration in Scotland, which requires at least 2 witnesses to a crime.
Without concrete evidence linking Gavin McGuire to the attack, police could no longer detain him.
At the end of November 1995, McGuire is released. It's like letting a panther out of a cage.
19 days later, 15 miles away in Kilmarnock, the brutal murder of Mari Julian sparked a high-profile hunt for her killer. In early January 1996, detectives had a breakthrough. CCTV from the night of her disappearance showed a man following another young woman, a man they recognized immediately.
It was Gavin McGuire. There's no doubt in anybody's mind about that.
That was an incredible find to pick that up, whilst routinely looking through CCTV footage. The officers knew of McGuire from before, from his activities in the Stevenson area, the local area.
On the 8th of January 1996, they interview him for the first time. He says, no, I was nowhere near the bus depot. I was in a bar in Kilmarnock called the Tudor Bar, and I didn't leave until 10:45.
McGuire's story did little to convince investigators, and his carefully concocted alibi was revealed to be false.
He did change his story when police showed him a video of himself in the shopping mall close to where Mari was attending theatre. In fact, he was there Christmas shopping.
It was enough to obtain a search warrant. On the 26th of January 1996, a search conducted at McGuire's mother's home recovered clothes and a piece of broken shoelace, similar in appearance to the one found by Mari's body.
He's brought in, and a biological sample of his is tested for DNA. But he has 2 brothers, and those 2 brothers need to be excluded. So their DNA is also tested, and although we're very close DNA-wise to our siblings, there are little tiny differences that set one sibling apart from another. And McGuire's DNA is proven to be the one that matches the DNA that was recovered from the scene of the crime, and not his brother's.
And at the end of January 1996, McGuire is charged with the murder of Mari Julian.
But unlike his court appearance in 1986, following the attack on Doris Thompson, McGuire refused to make any admission of guilt. Mari Julian's family would have to endure the nightmare of a trial, reliving the painful details of their daughter's horrific and agonizing final moments. In January 1996, Gavin McGuire was in custody, charged with the murder of Kilmarnock schoolgirl Mari Julian. If found guilty, the 37-year-old who terrorized the young women of Ayrshire for so long would face life imprisonment.
McGuire was charged with Mari's murder, and he appeared at Kilmarnock Sheriff Court 3 days later.
I was instructed for Gavin McGuire. I had consultations with McGuire, so I would have been involved from a reasonably early stage.
The trial for Mari Julian's murder at Glasgow High Court began in May 1996. The prosecution played a second piece of CCTV footage which showed McGuire stalking his victim as she walked home from the theatre.
A predator, of which there are few in Scotland, who Could easily have committed a crime like this, and he's got him on camera. Major breakthrough.
He had originally followed another girl out of the underpass, and quite quickly she'd turned into her own house. So he came back, and then he followed the victim. Her home wasn't that far. She walked home through an underpass and then onto a main road.
Presented with the video evidence, McGuire was defiant, challenging the prosecutor to produce any footage that showed him killing the girl.
McGuire is very, very angry in the doc. I mean, they point out that he's lied about where he was, that he was in the Tudor bar. No, you weren't. CCTV shows you're somewhere else. He's really, really furious. And at one point, he actually shouts in the court, "You've not got me on video killing her, so prove it."
McGuire had preyed upon young women since adolescence. He had a string of convictions of vicious sexual assaults and rapes to his name. But at trial, these were irrelevant.
Previous convictions are not allowed to be mentioned in court. The fact of previous convictions, even if I know them, do not impact on how I conduct a trial at all.
Also in the court was Doris Thompson, who'd suffered an horrific 3-hour ordeal at McGuire's hands in 1986.
When I heard about the murder in the paper, I had a feeling. I said, I wonder if he's out. I didn't even know he was out. I went to the trial, just listened to it.
The prosecution had an ace up their sleeve, a key witness who was ready to take the stand.
One striking thing I remember is that his mum cooperated and indeed gave quite important evidence, which frankly was a very brave thing for her to do.
Nettie McGuire courageously testified against her own son in court. It's never been confirmed whether or not she wrote the anonymous letter to Mari's family.
She gave evidence against him. She said that when she found his jeans in the washing machine the following day, there was blood on them.
At trial, it transpires that Gavin McGuire's mother had decided to wash them after believing his explanation that he tripped and injured himself while going to the toilet.
In court, McGuire insisted his mother was mistaken, claiming it was in fact mud on his jeans from walking the dog. McGuire had denied everything, but he could not hope to explain the damning evidence that detectives had amassed against him, including the shoelace recovered from the search of his mother's home.
The piece that was found at the scene and the piece that was found at the house of the assailant could actually be put together and physically match irrefutable evidence.
Ultimately, the crux of the case was the DNA evidence that was found at the scene.
They were able to pinpoint the DNA to McGuire himself. After examining McGuire's DNA, we have to find out what are the chances that another person could have deposited this kind of DNA at that scene with this kind of matching on the markers we're looking at. And at the time, the forensic scientists determined that the odds of that happening were 8,200 to 1. This was an incredibly high match ratio.
There is not much doubt in anyone's mind that McGuire is guilty. This is not a master criminal, but he is an exceptionally dangerous man, capable of monstrous deeds.
In spite of the evidence against him, McGuire maintained his innocence in Mari's murder, forcing her parents to suffer the agony of hearing in detail what horrors she'd suffered. 2 weeks after the high-profile trial had begun, the jury retired to consider its verdict.
Where I was sitting, I couldn't get a right look at him. But it didn't bother me. It didn't bother me. I was more focused on what was he going to get. Is he away this time for a while? He's bound to be.
While the verdict was being deliberated, the senior police officers standing outside the court were as nervous as I've ever seen police officers before a verdict. The jury returned a verdict very quickly, in about 30 minutes or so, which on any view is very quick in a case of that seriousness.
On the 30th of May 1996, McGuire was sentenced to 30 years imprisonment for the murder of Mhairi. Judge Lord Clyde called the crime an atrocity without mercy and reiterated that McGuire should never ever be released back into the public.
When I heard it was 30 years, I kept saying, oh, he's away for 30 years, and that I felt relief. But for me, that 30 years wasn't enough. I don't think a man like that should be ever released, because I know it's in him and what's in him, because I've seen it. Rehabilitation will never fix that. He's going to come out repeatedly and he'll just keep repeating what he's doing.
He'd already spent decades in prison at that time for attacks on women since he was a very young man. What was known about him at age 37, and sometimes this kind of behaviour could stop as individuals get older. There's no signs of that happening with Gavin McGuire.
In 2002, McGuire appealed his sentence. 8 years had been added to his original term to protect the public from danger. But new European human rights laws ruled this should be determined by a parole board, not a judge. His 30 years was reduced to 22 minimum, meaning he became eligible for parole in 2018.
I cannot believe that rage, that urge within him will have gone away even though he's now in his 60s. It's a very hard fire to extinguish. No matter how hard you try to rehabilitate them, it's very, very hard.
I don't think McGuire is ever going to change. He is always going to be a danger to women, and he's probably one of those people who the parole board should never release.
One of the most dangerous criminals that not just Scotland but the world has ever known.
For Doris, McGuire's potential release is a terrifying prospect.
Nobody ever gets away from me. That's what he said. It's never left. I still suffer from post-traumatic stress. It would have been easy to give up. Because I was exhausted. I was frightened. My children. That was my lifesaver. Because I had to look after them. I wouldn't leave them. Never. I'd never leave them. But at the same time, I'm here. And I'm living to tell the tale. And there's a lot to be grateful.
For McGuire, hurting others was a compulsion. One that started in early childhood with the animals in his care. His violent attacks escalated throughout his teens, 20s and 30s, with long stints in prison proving no deterrent. With the brutal and senseless murder of 16-year-old Mari Julian in 1995, Gavin McGuire was finally recognised as one of the world's most evil killers.